So this is from Donut Economics by Kate Rayworth. From endless growth to thriving in balance. Onwards and upwards may be a deeply familiar metaphor for progress, but in terms of the economy that we know, it has taken us into dangerous terrain. Humanity can affect the functioning of its own life support systems, says the ocean scientist Catherine Richardson. There are tipping points we are pushing on. How does this change our definition of progress? For over 60 years, economic thinking told us that GDP growth was a good enough proxy for progress and that it looked like an ever-rising line. But this century calls for quite a different shape and direction of progress. At this point in human history, the movement that best describes the progress we need is coming into dynamic balance. That calls for a profound shift in our metaphors from good is forward and up to good is in balance. And it shifts the image of economic progress from endless GDP growth to thriving in balance. The sense of dynamic balance resonates with decades of thinking about sustainable development. The idea of Earth as a spaceship, a self-contained living capsule, gained popularity in the 1960s, prompting the economist Robert Heilbroner to point out that, as in all spaceships, sustained life requires that a meticulous balance be maintained between the capability of the vehicle to support life and the demands made by the inhabitants of the craft. In the 1970s, the economist Barbara Ward, a pioneer of sustainable development, called for global action to tackle both the inner limits of human needs and rights and the outer limits of the environmental stress that Earth can endure. Later, in the 1990s, the campaigning organization Friends of the Earth advocated the concept of environmental space, arguing that all people have the right to an equitable share of water, food, air, land, and other resources within the carrying capacity of the Earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. A very timely and informative reading. I like the subtitle there of that book, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist, keeping us all in forward-thinking mode. Our presenter today, Mr. Adam Davis, is the Executive Director of the nonprofit Oregon Values and Belief Center. The Oregon Values and Belief Center is an independent, nonpartisan center which provides accurate opinion research to help Oregonians build stronger communities. Mr. Davis is a graduate of Portland State University and the University of Oregon Law School. He has conducted surveys across Oregon for nearly 40 years. It's going to be a lively discussion this morning. Please welcome Mr. Adam Davis.
Oh, it is just super to be here on a Sunday morning with all of you. I've been looking forward to this for some time now. From when you first contacted me about making a presentation. So I looked at this as an opportunity to spread the word about the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center. I thought I'd start with a little information about Adam Davis. Starting off with a couple things in my room here, which I don't know if you can see or not, but it'll give you a little bit of a feeling for me as a person. Anyone recognize this individual over my right shoulder, which may not be your right shoulder? And you'll see me go like this at times, but it's not a relative. It's Sergei Rachmaninoff, who is my favorite composer. And I get a great solace and inspiration from listening to his music. I have to be careful about that. I don't want to spoil myself too much. Now, over my file, that's the Kenai River up in Alaska. It was, if any of you have been up to Alaska, maybe some of you have had an opportunity to fish the river. It was a time when you could pull out close to 100-pound salmon the same kind of salmon that they were pulling out of Tillamook Bay in the 1800s. No more. And it's just a reminder of what's going on with the climate worldwide, and with poor fish management as well. And it's the polarity in my life, the outdoors and music and the arts, all very important to me. And just some other pictures. My wife. This is a picture of my folks in Palm Springs. They used to take us down there when we were kids. And they were two New Yorkers that moved out to Portland, and I'm the first Oregonian in the family. My brother was born up in Alaska. In 1977, I founded the firm Davis and Hibbets, and it became DHM Research. And I can't believe it when I say this, but for close to 45 years, I've been doing opinion research. I came into opinion research from jury behavior research. So I went to Portland State University and then went on to the School of Law. And when I graduated, I kind of combined my interest in opinion research with the law and did a lot of jury consulting. I want to maybe ground all of you a little bit on what opinion research is all about, because what I have to share with you is information about the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center, which is really at its core about doing better opinion research to help guide this state forward. I want to start with just mentioning that opinion research is often used by competing interests to try to drive public policy making, drive planning, drive communications. They hold up numbers and they say, look at all the people who feel this way about my initiative or my proposal. Darn it, we've got to go that way. And of course, the opposite. We shouldn't do that, because look at the opposition that opinion research shows there is out there across the state of Oregon. So I want to make sure you're anchored in the importance of opinion research and what's going on out there relative to planning, policy making, and communications. Okay. Now, opinion research takes two major forms. One is quantitative opinion research, and the other is qualitative opinion research. Very quickly, quantitative research you read the most about. They're the surveys. And as I've passed through my life at DHM, my professional career, I started off going door to door, wearing my little blazer, my little ID tag, and my clipboard and my questionnaire. And I'd knock on the door, and a respondent who was randomly selected, and we'll come back to that in a moment, what that means. They would invite me into the house. They'd invite me into their kitchen. We'd sit at the kitchen table, and we would be able to administer a 45-minute questionnaire, an hour questionnaire, and get incredible information from them. Well, those days came to an end for a variety of reasons, namely expense, and just with the way the society was changing. Gated communities, bigger and bigger dogs, more and more dogs. And we got to a point where the industry shifted to, guess what? Telephone surveys. Man, we rode telephone surveys for a long, long time. And you will remember getting those calls from firms like Gallup, from firms like Yankelovich, from firms like Lou Harris's firm. All those firms would be doing research like DHM was doing here in the state of Oregon, interviewing people by telephone. Then what happened to telephone? The big problem with telephone was caller ID. People stopped answering the phone. People also would not stay on the phone for a long period of time, which we need if we're going to get in-depth information, right? So questionnaires had to become shorter, and there were some groups that were more likely than others not to answer the telephone. Example, professional women. We just could not get a representative sample. So what happened then was online research. So we've gone from in-person to telephone, and we're now using online research. And the first question you should have is, well, talking about a representative sample, what are you getting on an online panel? See, online research uses what are called online panels. And online panels are recruited by companies, not the research companies, but other kinds of companies that build these panels. And they give access to companies like ours, DHM Research, to do research. Now, their job is to make sure there is a good cross-section of people in these panels for us to do our work, all right? So we can get the balance we need. We need 50% men, 50% women approximately. We need about 30% between the ages of 18 to 34 if you're doing a general population study. We need in the low 40s from the Tri-County area, but we also need some interviews completed in other areas of the state. They can provide us that. And that's how we do our online surveys. Very few people, I think, really understand that there is a science to what we do, right? It really is built on the science of statistics, but also related to that very closely are random samples. But for either one of those to work, you have to have a population pool that is representative of the full population so that you can complete what's called valid and statistically reliable research. So if you all feel like you're back in graduate school, I apologize. But I wanted to just kind of ground us in that. Now, that's quantitative research. The other kind of opinion research is called qualitative research. And you've all heard the term focus groups, right? Now, focus groups is one form of qualitative research. There are small group studies, large group studies, which are small focus groups and large focus groups. There's in-depth interviews, which is one-on-one. There is a technique that I actually characterize more as qualitative than quantitative, and that's ethnography, which I'll bet one or more of you have had some experience with, and that's just participant observation. It's something that I feel is so valuable that people overlook as a very, very valuable technique or methodology in learning what's going on with people in terms of attitudes and behavior. I love qualitative research, you guys. Why? Because you need time with people to really not only understand how they're feeling the way they do, but why they're feeling that way. And the group interaction really leads to a rich discussion that allows you to do your probing and really get at those underlying motivations that a quick online survey or a telephone survey just does not provide you. So that's a little primer on opinion research, and that's what I was doing in Oregon from 1977 to 2019. And I did this research statewide. I did it regionally, locally, worked for clients ranging from the Department of Administrative Services, the Land Conservation Commission, the Oregon Department of Forestry, to school districts across the state, work for TriMet, work for Metro. Our work focused on public policy. It focused on the planning, the public policy, and the communications that the public sector does. We absolutely assisted clients in the private sector as well. We did a lot of work for utilities over the years, and a lot of work for nonprofits like Foundations for a Better Oregon, and you know which foundations that consists of, namely Meyer, Oregon Community Foundation, the Ford Family Foundation out of Roseburg. So you guys, I've been in the trenches for a long, long time. And during that time, I just came to realize that there were some real things that I was doing and that others were doing that were bothering me. I knew how our research was being used. I knew it was being used to help with this planning, policy making, and communications that was being done. But I felt, bottom line, that it was not representative of all Oregonians. And what I mean by that is that the research was designed not to give voice to a truly representative cross-section of Oregonians, but to voters, and in some cases, only likely voters. And likely voters tend to be what? They tend to be older, they tend to be whiter, they tend to have higher education, higher income, longer term residence. So this research was being represented to policymakers and planners as representative of the state of Oregon, and it wasn't. And it got to me to such a point in 1992 that I said, enough is enough. We got to do the first Oregon Values and Beliefs study. Now, that study was conducted in a way that provided, in my opinion, people with better information, and better, namely, in terms of it being representative. Okay, I sampled the general population. I did not just sample likely voters. I stratified the sample. And what stratification means, instead of using proportional samples, which almost all the research that's done in Oregon uses proportional sampling, which means what? It means the interviews will reflect how the population of Oregon is proportioned across the state, right? So where do most of the interviews come from in a typical survey? The Portland metropolitan area, right? The 3 counties. So you do a 500 sample survey, and you're going to get over 200 of those interviews from the Portland area. You'll get a big hunk then from the Willamette Valley. And what do the people in Eastern Oregon, Central Oregon, Southern Oregon, North Coast, South Coast have to help them in their planning, policy making, and communication? So I've identified 2 issues here. The population that is targeted to be sampled, and then the sampling method itself, proportional versus what we call stratified. Stratified sampling, which was used in the 1992 Oregon Values and Beliefs Survey, says this: we're going to do the same number of interviews in the Portland metropolitan area that we're going to do in Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, and that those folks consequently will have enough completed interviews to help them with their planning, policy making, and communication. Because if you use a proportional sample, you will not get enough completed interviews for people in those areas of the state to do what they need to do. Organizations that are working hard to build strong communities, they need good information about needs, about challenges that people are facing individually and in their households. They need information about how people are getting their information. They need that. And most opinion research does not provide enough completed interviews to help policymakers and planners and communicators in rural Oregon. So the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center was really, study was really about the 1992 study, the 2002 study, and the 2013 study was about giving voice to all Oregonians, and namely really focusing on communities of color and on rural Oregonians, which I saw in so much of the other work we were doing were not being represented. And consequently, policymakers and planners were not hearing from those folks. So along comes 2019, and I hung up my hat, I thought, until COVID. I hung up my hat and I said, Gina, my wife, and she's been in the trenches with me for a long time. She used to travel with me to run the cameras for focus groups. She transcribed the tapes that I would make. And I said, sweetheart, let's form a nonprofit, independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit, dedicated to really giving voice to all Oregonians. And part of the expression, not having to kiss the ass of any particular client with a particular agenda that they're trying to push, and make this all about values and beliefs. And really making sure that communities of color are heard, rural Oregonians are heard. And I want to make something real clear. When I say stratified sampling, I'm not saying, well, Adam, what about a statewide read? Would it be wacky because you're giving these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 areas the same number of interviews? What we do to provide statewide findings is that we do statistical weighting. So in all the studies that the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center does now, we will report things so that people know what's going on regionally, because we'll have enough interviews for those folks, but we'll also be able to report statewide. We would what? We weight down less populated areas on a proportional basis so that we do get a valid read of what's going on at the state level. So again, your course this morning on statistics and opinion research continues. I want to just run through a quick PowerPoint. I'm a little nervous about this, that you'll be able to see it, but let's give it a try, David. I think you've got it, turn it on, and I don't know if you'll all be able to see it, but I think we can run through this pretty quickly. Before I do, I want to maybe have a little fun and give you 2 questions and try to, if you have a piece of paper and a pencil or pen, which, you know, all of us with computers these days, it's funny to watch people looking around and trying to find the paper and the pencil or the pen. But if you have it, I want to give you 2 questions. And after I read you the question, I want you to write down what comes to mind for you, okay? What do Oregonians value about living in the state of Oregon? What do Oregonians value about living in the state of Oregon? That'll be question number one. You could just write down one, but after one, write down what you think we hear as opinion researchers out there. What do we hear from them when asked that question about what it is that they value about living in Oregon? And by the way, it's very close to what it is that they value about living in their community. All right. The second question, number two, and sometimes what's kind of fun, you guys, is to have you speculate as opinion researchers what you think Oregonians would say to that, say a sample of Oregonians. Well, how about you as individuals? Now, what do you value about living in Oregon? Number two, question number two, what's the most important issue that Oregonians want to see their local government officials do something about? The Oregon Values and Beliefs Center, you know something now about what we're all about, but I mentioned the 1992 Oregon Values and Beliefs study. We really want to be able to continue doing that. And not once every 10 years, but every year. And what I envision is a rotating list of topics over a 3-year span that would allow us over time to get trend data. But for example, in 2021, we might want to look at public health, for example. We might want to look at the environment and then maybe the arts. And then next year, it would be 3 different issues. And then the year after that, 3 different issues. And then we come back to it in year 4 with what we surveyed about this year. And we'll see if there's a change in how people are feeling about things, what their values and beliefs are. Our goal really is, as I mentioned, to help organizations out there in all 3 sectors build stronger communities. And through the sample design we use to give more voice to the rural Oregonians and minorities. A very important goal for us is to show that there's common ground. It doesn't matter if you live on the east side of the mountains or on the west side of the mountains, whether you live in the northwest corner or the southeast corner of Oregon, there are certain things that we share, certain values and beliefs that we share. And we feel similarly about different issues and the value of different public services. We want to shine a light on those too, so that we have some common ground to move forward. These are real trying times, right, you guys? I mean, there's such a divisiveness out there, and the media feeds on that, and drives that wedge ever deeper and deeper. And what I hope the Oregon Values and Beliefs study can do is, the studies that the center is doing really show common ground that we can build on, rather than focusing entirely on the differences we have. And so we really hope that this is a way. It's more than research. It's as much public involvement, engagement, communications, and education as it is research. And I'll show you that in a moment. If you're an organization, I think you could be helped with the work that the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center does in a number of ways. And I've listed them here, with needs assessments, planning, policy making, program evaluations, communications, public involvement. Many organizations have a mandate now related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This can help. We're going to work hard to give voice to those people And we're also talking about helping with civic engagement and public education. I mentioned what distinguishes us, I think, from other public opinion research organizations. And when I was initially, when we had our initial conversation, I mentioned the Pew Research, and many of you know Pew. They do fascinating work, and I often try to help people in coming to know what OBBC is all about by referring to us being like a Pew Research Center for the state of Oregon. Our work is ongoing. Our work is independent and nonpartisan. We're going to work hard through our methodologies and our techniques to be representative of rural Oregon and minorities. We're going to always be guided by doing valid and statistically reliable work. And we're just not going to do surveys. We're going to do focus groups as well. I mentioned the idea of the rotating survey with a list of topics every year. That's what this column is, if you could see the arrow. And we're also planning on doing triannual surveys, an annual focus group, and regional analysis and reporting. These are the 8 areas that we're starting with. These are the Oregon Community Foundation's Leadership Advisory Council areas. So at the very minimum, our work will inform these folks in their grant making and will help their grantees, the organizations that they're giving grants to. But you can see here that instead of being all worked up about just this area up here, right, the northern and even the northern Willamette Valley and the south Willamette Valley, we're talking about hearing from people across the state of Oregon. Sorry for the writing here, which you cannot make out very well, but this is to make the point here that we're as much about communications as we are about research. So research comes from the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center. There's quantitative research, which is the annual survey and the triannual surveys. Right now, we're doing monthly surveys. We've got to get the resources together and the panel developed so that we can get going on this particular research approach. And we're also going to be doing qualitative research, a large group study in each of those areas. And this kind of outlines all the different tasks that these projects involve. But communications is important as research. Another frustration I had as a researcher was just seeing a lot of our work put up on a shelf or really not fully used. We're going to have a website, and we're making a real commitment to getting the findings out to people. And hopefully it'll just keep feeding itself and will be up and going. So far, we're a young organization, but we had Stoll Reeves do our 501c3 filing, and we broke all records in terms of how quickly it was turned around by the IRS. And I think it broke one of their records. We got it within 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it can take 3 to 6 months. So we're up and going as a 501c3. We've got our website, which is a work in progress. We've got all our systems in place. We have a board of directors, and I'm not interested in us being about the usual suspects and big money names and having representation from leaders across the state. I'm really interested in people that are genuinely committed to providing good values and beliefs research to Oregon organizations and individuals. And an example of a person that I have on our board is Robin Teeter, which some of you may know. Robin is just left Healthy Democracy. Healthy Democracy is that organization that does the citizen initiative reviews, where they randomly select people from across the state of Oregon. They bring them to Salem, room and board. They run an initiative by them, arguments for it, arguments against it. Again, a representative sample. And it's then in the voters pamphlet, along with all the other special interest statements. Here's a statement from a cross section of Oregonians. Those are the kinds of folks that I'd like to have on the board of the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center. Some of you may also know Ethan Seltzer. Ethan is the retired professor from Portland State University, but has really studied differences in opinions, attitudes and behavior between rural Oregon and urban Oregon. So we got our board of directors. We're working to expand our board of directors. And I think it's a great opportunity for young people to meet folks, to learn things, and to build their careers, including their resumes. Things that are on the horizon, this is huge, and this is where all my time is being spent now, and the assistant executive director's time, and that is building the panel. So we got to build that panel out. We're closing in on 1,000 Oregonians, but we want to really have 600 Oregonians in each of those 8 regions by May. And we're working real hard in partnership with some organizations out there to help us with this. It's not easy reaching people, but a big part of our panel build out is a rewards program. So you know why we offer $100 or $150 for people to show up at a focus group? There's a reason. We're just not handing money away. But quite frankly, if we didn't give an incentive, an honorarium like that, we would be less likely to have a representative cross-section of people. And we also want to send people a message that we value their opinions. So a big part of our panel is the rewards program. And you guys, this is real cool. There's no other state in the union right now that has something like the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center, where we have our own panel. We don't have to use panels that other companies have. Our panel, we built the software. It's proprietary. And we have this rewards program, which means those people are our people. They're part of the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center, which means we can contact them. We can follow up with them on their answers. We can invite them to focus groups. You can't do that with private sector panels, because those panel participants are theirs, right? They're their investment. They're their little gold nuggets. So we made a commitment during the COVID year of 2020 to build out that panel and to build out that rewards program so that we can get a representative cross-section of people in the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center. I mentioned it being regular. Communications is important as the research itself, and we're always looking to improving research techniques and outreach techniques. One thing to get a little nerdy on you is that any particular project, like the annual survey and the triannual surveys, will likely involve not only sampling the panel, but using other methodologies to reach folks as well, because not everyone has a computer, not everyone has access to high-speed internet. You're going to have to reach them in other ways. And that includes going back going back to Adam in his blazer, going up to a house and knocking on it, or an intercept interview at a randomly selected place in a community. There is a lot to be done to assure valid and statistically reliable research these days. It's very challenging. So that's a quick overview on the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center. And why don't we spend a couple of minutes on my two questions, and then we can open it up to Q&A. Does that make sense, David?
Yes,
Sounds great.
That's great.
Okay, so question number one. What is it that people value about, I'm going to stop share. And I want to see all your faces. There we go. What is it that people value about living in Oregon? So let's hear some different answers from around the group. Let's start with you, Jeff Ray.
Okay, so I posted in the chat several things for number one: environment, climate, and friendly, not so churched people.
That's great, Jeff. I want to go to someone else. Let's go to you, Willie. I see you're unmuted.
I just said like-minded neighbors, but that's really only true probably in Portland community. I don't, if I lived in Umatilla, I probably would have more trouble finding like-minded neighbors.
Well, I had two things. I said the natural resources, of course, and then the political progressivism. That's
Okay.
Or lack of a better word.
Okay. Now, let's remember, as you look across the screen, the demographics of our group here, right? I mean, that's always one thing to keep in mind. I'm going to share with you now what we would, we continue to find out from people, what it is that they value about living in the state of Oregon. Two things first. One is that's an open-ended question. I love open-ended questions. I wish I could ask only open-ended questions because you learn so much from seeing the words people use. And that's the beauty of online research, is because it's unfiltered, right? So you see the semantics, you see the imagery that people are using. That's critical to really understanding how people are feeling about things. But can you imagine having 500 responses if it was a 500 survey, or if someday I want to do a 3,000 sample, having 3,000 responses that are often multiple, like some of you gave me more than one thing, which is what is fine. That's what I asked you to do. You have to code those, right? You remember that from college? You just go through a random number and you develop broad categories like buckets, and you read each one and you drop them into the bucket. So here are the things that we hear from people for what it is that they value about living in Oregon. The clean air and the clean water. Clean air and clean water. More broadly speaking, the environmental quality maybe, but clean air and clean water. The natural beauty, which is different. The natural beauty, I mean, that's the Columbia Gorge, right? That's the rolling hills of wine country. That's Ecola State Park on the coast. It's the high desert. So natural beauty is really important to people. Again, the question is, what do they value about living in Oregon? Outdoor recreation opportunities. Now that might be a little bit of a reflection of our demographic group here. Some of you may touch on it, but if you spend time with those responses, you see that there's two buckets within the bucket. One is that they value outdoor recreation because it's so close. So the proximity of outdoor recreation And then differently is the variety of outdoor recreation, all the different things you can do in Oregon relative to outdoor recreation. The fourth one, and a couple of you touched on this, is what I call the sense of community. And it doesn't matter whether you're in a highly dense, high density area like Northwest Portland or a small community in rural Oregon. The sense of community that people have is that some people have is very important to them, and they put that down as something they value about living in Oregon. And number 5, and I'd be curious, I want to just see a show of hands here if any of you had this show of hands the climate about living in Oregon. Some of you did. And you know, I hear from people about, oh, it's gray and it's rainy, and does it vary when you ask the question? No, the climate holds up. But then again, remember, we have a lot of newcomers, and they're moving from areas of the United States that, you know, we're temperate. We're fantastic when it comes to climate. It did take a little hit over the last couple of years with the wildfires and the smoke and everything. So, you know, it's one of those things that you'll want to monitor. So those are the top 5 things. Now, what's missing? They're not telling you that they value the incredible public education system we have here in Oregon or the amazing transportation system we have here in Oregon. The first mention of anything that comes close to the kinds of issues that consume so much of our thinking would be no sales tax, and they love to not have to pump their own gas. So that's it, you guys. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. And why is this important to know? Because this is the common ground. This is what people need to know about people across the state of Oregon, is that we all share these things when it comes to what it is that we value about living in Oregon. We also have very similar feelings as to what is the most important issue we want our local government officials to do something about. And I'm going to put aside COVID, because COVID has just turned things upside down. I'm going to put aside the economy for a second and know that these are the key issues across the state of Oregon. But the number one issue, wherever you are in the state of Oregon, and I'll give you number 1 and number 2, and they're related, is homelessness and affordable housing. So I don't care if you're in Eugene or Portland, in Central Oregon, Eastern Oregon, the South Coast, or the North Coast. We were able to do an in-depth values and beliefs study that was stratified by over 10 different areas in the state. And at the top of the list were those 2 issues. So that's good to know. And it's important for policymakers and planners to know that as well. And not only is there common ground geographically, but there are issues where it doesn't matter what your race or ethnicity, there's agreement on. So to wrap things up, that's what the Oregon Values and Beliefs Center is all about, you guys. Doing a better job giving voice to all Oregonians, and secondly, showing common ground that maybe we can stand on together to build a stronger state for the future. So we're almost at 11, I see, and I guess we can open it for questions. I'm looking forward to hearing what's on your minds. And sorry for just throwing a lot at you this morning on a Sunday morning. Yeah.
We love it. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for a very lively presentation and the great work you're doing at the Oregon Values and Belief Center. As the MC, I'll start with the first question. And so my question is, you mentioned this at the start of your presentation, and there's been a lot of talk nationally that certain groups don't trust surveys. They don't think surveys are valuable, and so therefore they don't engage in the process. But sometimes community leaders can inspire communities to be more active and take surveys. So do you rely on local community leaders to inspire larger populations?
That is a super question. I can tell we're going to have a lively discussion. We're working hard to build a representative sample of Oregonians. One of the techniques we could use is to work with community partners. And you've got to work directly with the leaders of these organizations. So if you're interested in building up the Latino number of panel participants, you go to a community organization, you talk to their leader, and you say, help us. Get a message out to your clients, get a message out to the people you serve. Give us a toot your horn about us in your newsletter. Do something. You guys, I have true confessions. I spent hours trying to do that last year. And it's not going to change, I'm afraid. What I learned was that these organizations are under siege right now. They're so many of them are under amazing stress. The demand for their services is higher than ever before. They're struggling with funding. They're struggling with staffing. People learning to work from homes and having communications challenges and everything. They don't have the bandwidth to help me. I mean, I can make the lift as light as it can be. I mean, I drafted letters for them. I said, this is what you need to do, tweak it, because you know your people better than me, and get it out to folks. No way. And I just decided, okay, we're going to have to do this in a different way. So we're working really hard at getting the word out through a social media campaign, through a print campaign, working real closely with a statewide network of news organizations, and just doing the lifting ourselves on that. Know this, we're committed to getting these hard to reach populations into our panel. We're committed to having them reflected in the samples that we use in our research. But it is hard, and you're absolutely right. There's a credibility issue related to an organization like the Oregon Values and Belief Center. That's why I'm working hard to get those testimonials, which some of you may have seen, people that I know are respected leaders in the state saying this organization could really help us. But quite frankly, it's going to be us that are going to get those people on using a variety of different techniques. And don't forget that rewards program. People might be skeptical, but if they can make a little money and pocket it or donate it to a nonprofit, which we give them the chance to do so, they go, okay, I don't know what's going to happen to my opinion, but I'll go along for the ride.
Well, thank you. And I'll tell you that in my preparation for this meeting today, I did become one of your panelists yesterday. So you have at least one new panelist.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
We're right there. We're right there, 1,000. You could be our 1,000th person.
How about that? Before we get to Al Christian's question, we did have a nice request from Jeff Strang in the chat for you, Adam, to answer the two questions.
I'm a natural beauty guy. I really, you could probably tell with the way I was discussing it, I am so proud of our state. I don't think there's another state like it. We have our problems, we have our challenges, but what an incredible place we have in terms of the natural beauty, and very closely related to that is outdoor recreation. I'm a downtown Portland guy, and what I see going on with homelessness and affordability is just heart-wrenching. And you all know, your group particularly, what a complex issue that is. It is, you know, I remember Duncan Wise with the Oregon Business Council. He was the one who introduced me to thorny problems or thorny issues. This one has got them all, and that's the issue that I want to see our local officials do something about.
You explained how difficult your work is. There's something that's, you know, if you're talking about values, I would think of that the values that are most in this under discussion in the political arena are rights. That we get people stirred up about abortion rights, gun rights, workers' rights, freedom of speech, right to work, so many different kinds of rights. Mm-hmm. And it's easy for somebody who's polling you to get you aroused if they're trying to get a particular point of view advanced for their client to get you to agree that, oh, that right is very important. But the thing that really has to be recognized is that justice, which you obviously advocate for, is achieved by balancing of rights. Is there anything in your polling that you can tell us about how Oregonians, have you gotten to the point where you can figure out how people feel about balancing one right against another? Are you trying to uncover that kind of an issue in your work? What have you found, if anything, et cetera, et cetera? How do we handle this to achieve justice by properly balancing the rights when your art, which supposedly drives all this politics, is so hard to apply?
Yeah, you're right on it, and you're touching on why I'm excited about the potential of the Oregon Values and Beliefs Survey. I mean, we're not going to be working for any politician or candidate for office, ballot measure. This is not about providing information to a campaign. This is really about understanding what Oregonians value, what they believe, and why they feel that way under an independent and nonpartisan umbrella. You touch on a issue that is huge with me. And I'm going to get a little nerdy wonky on you and say that conventional questionnaire development absolutely, I say, doesn't really often reflect validity. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. If you ask people to rate those 5 things that I mentioned to you, rate them on a 1 to 5 scale. You know what ratings that each of them would receive? Between 4 and 5. On a 1, don't value at all, to 5, value a lot. So you could be very selective and say, look at this issue, you know, it's number 1. What they don't tell you is that everything else was number 1, or everything else was number 1 or 2. And there are techniques that you can use. One, for example, is called a technique called max diff, where you literally take, say, a list of 10, and you present people with scenarios. So your computer screen would trade off these values in pairs across a number of different screens. What do you value more? Clean water or the natural beauty of the Columbia Gorge? What's the most important problem you want your local government official to do something about? Education funding versus affordable housing. But each screen will show you a different pairing of different items. And this technique allows us to do what is called relative ranking. And I think relative ranking is the best way of representing how people are feeling about things, because you're absolutely right. You got to put people in that trade-off position to really understand what they're feeling and why they're feeling that way. But there are other techniques: smack stiff, conjoint, discrete choice, all those kinds of techniques. But you guys, it takes money, it takes time. Clients often don't have either. And an organization like Pew, if any of you know how they're funded, they've got a foundation behind them that's unbelievable. I think it's steal money from years and years back, but there's a firewall between the Pew Foundation and the Pew Research Center. My hope, my dream someday is that we'll have an endowment that can really allow us to do this kind of research that really gets at what you're talking about.
Our next question is from Willie Woolworth. Willie.
Oh, hi. There was a word that you used at the very beginning of your program, and maybe I'm spelling it wrong, but I can't find it or what it means. Did you use a word like onography or onography?
Ethnography.
Okay, what is that?
Yeah, ethnography. ETH.
Oh, no wonder I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
I'd like to describe it real simply as participant observation. I'll give you an example out of the consumer world, for example. If you sit in a hotel lobby and you just observe what is going on, you can learn so much about an organization, how they treat their people, how long it takes for them to be noticed. And you can do the same thing in the public policy arena as well. And that's just to observe people. Say you have a homeless person and they need help. So they're in a line at one of the aid organizations downtown, for example. Just watch what goes on with them. What are they talking with the person who's standing in line next to them about? How are they treated when they get through the door? How are they holding their body? Remember, nonverbal communication is huge, you guys. And how is the person who's providing this service doing in terms of their demeanor and the kind of work they're doing? I see that there's a kitty in one of the windows, and I have to warn you, mine may be coming up here to say hi in a moment. But Willie, does that help a little bit? It's participant.
Yes, I certainly, I spelled it completely wrong. I misheard it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from our current president, Mr. David DiNucci.
David.
Hi. Thanks very much. I was really actually kind of surprised that some of the values were so common among all the different parts of Oregon. I kind of thought some of those would be centered more in Portland and other places would have more, well, I knew that nature, et cetera, would be all over the place. But for example, homelessness, that surprised me that places other than Portland would see that so much as a focus. But what my main question is it's called values and beliefs, and we heard a lot about values. What do you define as beliefs in your research as opposed to values, and what kinds of research have you done on that?
Yeah, the words are used often to mean the same thing, David. In my thinking, I look at values, and I've been working on this since '92, and have been kind of tracking some different what I call core values and beliefs. I'll just share with you a couple of them. One is participation in family. It is a core value and belief, and cuts across all demographic groups and geographic groups. Religion and spirituality is, in my opinion, a core value and belief. And that varies significantly by demographics and psychographics. And you'll see some differences by geography and as well. Another one would be career and job opportunity, would be what I would call a core value and belief. Getting back to the question about relative ranking, I look at those core values and beliefs. I've got about 10 of them. I'm constantly looking at them. I'm constantly measuring them using different techniques. Relative ranking, regular rating, points allocation exercises, all that kind of stuff. And I'm, again, looking particularly for subgroup differences. Beliefs, on the other hand, are how people feel about specific issues. And a lot of times how they're feeling about a specific issue can link back to a particular core value that they have. David, I want to just expand on something you said that's, I think, important for all of you to know. And that is, we do share those 5 things as Oregonians, regardless of where we live: our age, our gender, race, ethnicity. Those are important things to people. Outdoor recreation for some people is just, my community is a great place for me to bicycle around and walk. Other people, it's kayaking and mountain climbing and fishing and hunting. Yes, hunting. I mean, whatever it is, but it's there. Here's where the disagreement is, and that is the role of government. And there's where you're seeing so much of what's reflected in current affairs and current events is the difference, right? It's the differences. It's how we feel about government, the role of government in solving the problem of what? Affordable housing, solving the problem of the homelessness. So there's where you pick up differences. Those are beliefs in the role of government. The other one is public finance, and people feeling different about public finance. And linked to both those issues is what I'm sad to report to all of you. And if there's one takeaway from this morning, I want you to remember this, is that I remain very concerned about the incredible ignorance there is among people about the ABCs of government, about public finance, about history, about geography. And I'll give you an example. Portland Harbor cleanup. You haven't read or heard much about it recently, but it's been a big issue over the years. I did a focus group on that. And I asked people to do an exercise, and I asked them to take a blank sheet of paper. I am a real believer in written exercises and focus groups. I said, take a sheet of paper out and draw a line across that sheet of paper, kind of make it a little squirrely. And I want you to consider that to be the Willamette River. And now I want you to put another line intersecting it, and I want you to name that the Columbia River. Okay? And I want you on the line of the Willamette River to indicate where Portland is, where Salem is, and where Eugene is. Okay? Now, here was the biggie. I want you to indicate with another line the direction you think the water is flowing. They had no idea what direction the water was flowing. Okay? It was exactly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 had it right, 1/3 had it wrong, and 1/3 had no idea. And what I'm saying, you guys, is this is what we're dealing with here. We've got people that aren't aware of things that unfortunately are so important to effective planning, policy making, and communications. We have about half of Oregonians not knowing we have 2 U.S. senators. I mean, you've seen these numbers, right? You often see them at the national level. I once asked in a survey, and I do, you can't do these kinds of questions online because people like Jill will look them up before they answer it. But on telephone, no, because you're doing it on the telephone. You can do those kinds of questions on the telephone pretty easily. I ask them, name any source of revenue that helps pay for public services. And I had a third of the people saying, I have no idea what pays for public services. And I would have accepted any answer. I would have accepted sales tax. I would have accepted any answer. But a third said, I have no idea. Another third, they were totally off base. And then the one that was so disappointing to me, and I do need to benchmark this, is name a public service that you feel contributes to the livability and quality of life you have in your community. And I'll never forget, I had Oregon transportation officials behind the one-way mirror in a focus group. And I think they came out of their seats because what I was met with when I asked that question was total silence. I was met with heads being lowered, playing with your earlobe, playing with your hair, hoping I would not call on them to name a public service that they feel contributes to the quality of life and livability they have in their neighborhood, in their community. There was silence, and then finally someone spoke up. The police. Silence again. Oh, yeah, that's right. Fire, emergency medical. Silence again. And there's such a disconnect, you guys, around this, and we can all point to why that might be. Everything from civics not being taught in school to the breakdown of the community and what's going on at homes and the economy, on and on and on and on. But that gets to more the beliefs end of things, okay? The values are really those core values that we and others have been studying for a long time.